It's time for episode 2 of the Rob and Eritrea Show. We're back. She's back from the road. It's March 2023, and this is episode 2 of Rob and Eritrea. What up?
It's been a while, but not really. It's only been a month, and I'm so excited for episode 2.
Yeah, and like contrary to popular belief, we're not going to be breaking down Creed 3, but maybe that'll be a future episode
It's not a
because
movie. This is not a movie podcast. This is
no,
just
no.
a this is the diabetes show, but
But we did both see it, and if we had to weasel in a reason why you should, disability awareness, they have the deaf daughter speaking sign language. Excellent, excellent stuff.
I don't know. I think the best thing you said was people will punch each other in the face before they go to therapy,
Yeah,
and that movie
men will
was
literally fight for the heavyweight championship of the world instead of going to therapy. Yeah, it's true. It's true.
I think it's top 10 one of the best things you've ever said, but it's a really good movie. So if you need something fun to do with your diabetes peeps, that's what you should do. We recommend.
Absolutely. And speaking of doing things with diabetes peeps, it's been a busy month. We've had a lot of events and kind of travel. You especially, you were overseas you were at ATTD. Was that your first time to ATTD or second?
This is my second time. I've been at Diatribe now, a full year. So Advanced Technologies and Treatments for People Living with Diabetes is the biggest international conference other than the American Diabetes Association, which is in California this year. So yeah, my second time was big baller stuff.
Yeah, it's very cool and lots of really good sessions that I saw shared on social media, but nothing topped the diabetes news this month quite like the 2 weeks ago today at time of recording on March 1st, 2023. Eli Lilly introduced their reduced insulin pricing press release. So Novolog and some of this new long-acting insulin as well are going to be discounted $25 and $35 depending on a lot of different factors. But big news for diabetes advocates, for people who've been working, many, many years, day in, day out, advocating for the cost of insulin to go down, both like in federal legislation and calling for price caps. And, I think this is a step in the right direction. I think that seeing that and like seeing the response, and it seemed like kind of a collective sigh of relief that was like, hey, there's going to be a way to get Lispro or Humalog for not an exorbitant amount of money, like from that $300 a vial down to like 35 in some cases. And so that's good news. Obviously, the reasons why they did that, you can kind of dig deep and think about regulation and the government getting involved and having to have a plan. But regardless, it was done. And I'm excited as it rolls out here in the summer of 2023. We're going to see, hopefully good stories of people who are spending less on the insulin that they need to survive. So that was
Oh,
excellent.
a win is a win. And this is so crazy. I was thinking about this earlier, but like diabetes has been in the ether for a while with this presidency and what's happening, blah, blah, blah. But this, in my opinion, and I was just like thinking about it earlier, it came to a head when somebody hacked Lily's Twitter account and when
Yeah,
they were
yeah.
like, hey, insulin could be this cheap. And then everyone was like, hey, well, could they actually make insulin that's cheap? And people were like, yes, they could literally do this like right now, snap their fingers. And I think all of that pressure, scrutiny, whatever, has now like brought so much of the work of advocates to a head. And it's just incredible. It's really incredible to see, but it also makes me so sad for the people who did this work who didn't get to see it happen.
Mm.
And that is a very sobering thought because it just reminds me that there is still so much work to be done for access and accessibility for everybody.
And we had the Pay or Die producer on the podcast this month. They just debuted at South by Southwest, and Nicole Smith Holt was on the panel and in the documentary, and her son Alec passed away tragically from rationing insulin in 2017. And yeah, you're right. There's been a lot of people who are no longer with us and they didn't
Yeah.
get to see this day. And the people who rallied to tell their stories and to protest and to advocate when there was nothing in it for them, we owe them a great debt of gratitude. And the pillars are not done falling because today, of all days, March 14th on Pi Day, Novo Nordisk announced that they released a very similar press release about Vlog and they're also, I believe, Levemir, their long-acting insulin product, are also going to be discounted starting January 2024. So a little bit
It's
longer to wait.
Novolog and like Novolog Mix, I believe, as well as Levemir and Novolid, just to do my producer stuff.
And I saw there were people asking about, whether Ozempic was going to be on that list. And as far at this point, it is not on that list of discounted, diabetes drugs. But, I think, again, like one of the things that I've been thinking a lot about just in general, not necessarily any related at all to diabetes or pharmaceuticals or anything like that, but just more like human behaviors is that we kind of are on this pendulum and we swing from one side to the other, whether it's politically, whether it's through user behaviors or innovation. And then somebody steps out and innovates and does something kind of bold, makes a bold move, and then people follow suit. And I think that's what we're seeing with the manufacturers is that what Lilly stepped out and did it first. Now Novo follows suit, and I expect that there will be a Sanofi announcement coming soon, just so that everybody is on the same page. And hopefully, also there's been a new Insulin Act introduced in legislation in the United States. Bernie Sanders and some others are
Yep.
behind it. So again, a lot of momentum, like you said, politically in the news for diabetes, which is great. Is awesome a thing to be able to see. Like, hey, here's another good news because for so long, anything diabetes related about insulin pricing has always been bad. So and bad for people with diabetes. So
Wins
nice
are
to
wins.
chalk up a win in the win column.
And people are allowed to celebrate. Like, while we're talking about it, just really want to step on it for 1 second. Like, if you are still not happy about the announcement because you think that we're it's not mutually exclusive. Like, you can be happy that we're taking steps forward and still recognize that we've come so far, we've lost people on this journey, and there's still so much more to do. Like, I don't know. There was some posts that I saw online from within the community and people addressing it in their stories, multiple people. I'm going to shout out one of them, Monique Nicole, because we talked about it for a while. But just like, it's okay to celebrate and still think about the work that has to happen because I think people should be allowed to be happy about things. Let them have joy, you know?
Yeah, and I mean, we talk about it all the time with diabetes management. If you're not celebrating your small wins, like it's going to be very difficult to continue this long journey. It is a long journey. It's a marathon, not a sprint. You got to keep going and celebrate those small wins. And I think, yeah, I mean that kind of is it for me. Like let's
Yeah.
acknowledge that there's work to be done still. Let's acknowledge that this is the beginning, not the end, but that we are in a much better place than we were a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, and we're in changing times. I wanna also talk about just in the just 'cause I wanna keep it inclusive, like CGM access and coverage being talked about for people living with type 2 diabetes. Like, people with type 2 diabetes deserve access to CGMs. Time and range has shown to increase our lifespan as people living with diabetes, and so I just give me all the change, give me all the reform. I am here for it.
Yeah, and there's been good news in the UK.
Yeah.
NHS and CGM are, being added to sort of the standard of care, which is exciting. There's good stuff happening. And interestingly enough, it's funny, we shout out my man Bill Atkins, who is a Medtronic diabetes ambassador, and that's how I know him. He sent me an email. He recorded on his phone a segment on CBS New York, and I believe
Oh,
somebody else
yeah.
reached out that there was some old footage of me talking about the price of insulin and the price of diabetes management from 2019, I think. And it was funny, like I recorded it in our recreation office after I taught an improv class. So we didn't get to the office till like 11 p.m. And the guy set up his camera and we shot this thing and then like we wrapped about 1 a.m. And it was kind of right when we had moved into that office and now we're right about to move out. So it's kind of interesting to see it pop back up again after all these years. So been doing this a while, talking about it publicly and really, I don't know, trying to be a face of diabetes out there and just, be the real.
I love seeing that clip of you. It was very Rob 2017 hair. I wanted to roast you, but you were doing a good thing, so I literally
I know I had a little bit of the fade going, a little bit of the beard still. Yeah. Much toned down persona these days.
a different Rob, a different time, but it's still the same message.
Well,
Give people the shit they need.
yeah, man. I don't know. I try not to switch up. You won't catch me switching up. I'm pretty much consistent all the way around. Okay. So we've been kind of traveling, both you and I. I took 2 trips in February and you took a long
Mhm.
trip to Europe for ATTD and stuck around for a little while afterwards. So let's talk about it.
I wanna hear about LA. I saw your post. I saw because you could just, if there's one thing Rob Howe does is spill the tea. That's why I love hanging out with you. You be spilling the tea. But what happened? Like, you said you had the worst diabetes day, and, like, you're Rob Howe. Like, what do you mean you had the worst diabetes day?
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting to hear you say it like that because I have days with diabetes that suck. And, sometimes it's not my fault, sometimes it's my fault, but sometimes it's not. And this was one of those days. I kind of, I had breakfast and I was on vacation, so I had like a nice, I had like a breakfast sandwich or something at a Sweet Salt in LA, shout out. And my blood sugar came up afterwards and I was like, okay, like maybe I just had like a more, my eating time is off. I'm on a different time zone, blah, blah, blah. And then it kept going up, kept going up. So I was like, okay, let me change my site. Let me get this thing going. So step one, all right, cool, still high. Let me go get some work. I was at a hotel that had a gym, so I walked in, got some like squats and got some good, got a little sweat going.
Okay.
Then I took a walk and like nothing was working. I was chugging water. I probably had like 8 bottles of water because I found they had free water bottles in the gym. So I was going ham. That's the thing I love is free water bottles. Then I was like, man, well, this still isn't moving. I've done all this stuff. Like something else is wrong. And my blood sugars had been, over 250, topped out about 400 for 2 or 3 hours. And if you know me, you know that I don't like that.
You're a grumpy man.
I'm
Mr.
pretty
Rob is
cranky.
grumpy.
And, Erica was away hanging out with one of her friends. So I was kind of by myself and, just working and kind of hanging out. And then this sort of became my big problem of the day to figure out. And turns out this insulin vial that I had opened, it had like made its way to the back of the fridge, I guess, over, the years. And it had expired in January of 2023. And normally I've used expired insulin vials before and they've been fine. And my advice to people, because it's off label, obviously, like I don't want to like promote off label use, but test it. If it works, then I think it's fine to use. And if it doesn't work, then obviously don't use it. So unfortunately, I had to throw away like a full vial of insulin because it just didn't work. But once I got it changed, I was in good shape. And so it just took a while. It took a lot of, being mindful. It took a lot of, I used all my tools in the toolkit. And then once I got that insulin in me, that number came straight down. So it just goes to show, I don't care how healthy you are. I don't care how many diabetes hacks, how hydrated, how well slept, how well rested, how well exercised. If you don't have insulin, your blood sugar will be high. And uh, that's what I was going through. So I finally got it in there. And then you know what? It just reminded me of our interview with Jazz Sethi last fall. And we had just posted a video on Instagram. It was like, it's a bad diabetes day. It's not a bad diabetes life. I was in LA, a place that I love, hanging out with my dear friends. And we had a great long weekend in LA with our friends James and Alexis and Ryan and Gabby, and we just had a blast. So, it was all good. And we even got to go to Tom Tom, Lisa Vanderpump's restaurant, before all this crazy Bravo drama between Tom Sandoval and
Are you a Bravoite? Do you
well,
know about the drama?
I know about the drama only because of my wife, who is so plugged in to the Bravo extended
I
universe.
don't even know. I'm gonna have to call Erica because I don't know the breakdown. Sometimes they listen to Erica tell me
Yeah,
everything,
hopefully
but
some listeners are here listening and we get that in. So yeah.
extremely niche. It's very niche, but it's like it's funny. But so I guess I liked how overall I didn't ruin the entire weekend for you. It was just like this is a moment, a day, and I'm gonna take it as such. And we move on. We win. We still ball. I guess is the attitude.
Yeah, I mean, I think you asked me earlier before we started recording, like how I talk to myself after I do things that are good, or like you mentioned, like if you're
Yeah.
just not feeling it and you work out, like do you like, positively affirm yourself or whatever the case may be. And I don't have I'm not always so great at it. I'm like learning, I'm trying to be better about it. But again, I just came back to that quote from Jazz and I was like, hey, yes, this sucks, but it's not the full day. We got it figured out. It could have been way worse. And
Yeah.
don't let it ruin my time. So again, just trying to be more present, trying to focus on, what's good about those things, acknowledge the bad, but there is that sort of duality of diabetes. That's actually a great transition because the week after I got back from LA, I went to Greensboro to
Yep.
my first like JDRF summit, first speaking gig since the pandemic. I think I did a couple virtual keynotes during the pandemic, but since like actual, in-person events are back, it was my first one. And I had actually kind of changed how I thought about doing them. It's not a huge priority to me to go do those anymore. And I honestly thought they might be behind me for a little bit, like in
Yeah.
terms of speaking. But I want to shout out the team in JDRF, North Carolina. They are doing the work. They reached out to me after like talking to me about our More Than a Diabetic episode where we like really, took a in-depth look at a lot of the challenges that JDRF has introduced to the community and some of the things that they need to do. And they said, "Hey, we've heard this. It was uncomfortable, but we're gonna take steps to really do better about this." And so, not only it was one of the more diverse summits that I'd ever been to in terms of attendees, and it was at a historically black college at North Carolina A&T. And so, it was really cool to see like, hey, they had plenty of options to go use for their venue. They put it into a black college and university. They had inclusive speakers. They really were doing the work, and I wanted to reward them for that. And yeah, I just had a great time. It was cool to be in person. I got to meet DJ DJ Lipscomb, who's part of the JDRF Game to Give crew, And shout out to DJ and Corey who's part of our team editing our videos. And it was cool to see him in person and just hang out and have a conference day. So it was good to be back in the mix. It was a really like whirlwind trip. My diabetes did cooperate, so that was nice. But
And you made content. I loved the reels. I love the Rob goes through DFW airport and this is what he does to get to the conference. And you got to like debut this whole new thing, the dichotomy of diabetes. So you on your grind, man. It's nice to be back on it, I bet.
it was nice, and I think too, we were talking about that duality, right? Like, where you can acknowledge that there's work to be done and also be excited that there's progress, or that you've had a bad diabetes day and also let it not ruin your entire trip. Like, both of those things can be true. That's what I was trying to share with that dichotomy of diabetes presentation, and, you know, I don't think it was too heady of a concept. I think it was, really, really fun and good, and, it was nice to be back in front of people, got my heart racing a little bit. And then I settled right in and had a great time, and they were a great crowd. So yeah, I'm back in the swing. Shout out to David Mina, Type 1 Livabetic, for creating the presentation. So I got to do what we want to do here and support diabetes creators. So all around, it just felt like a win-win-win. Like, we were doing the thing with a chapter. We had a shared vision. We had a great opportunity, and we were able to, partner with other diabetes creators and use, my platform to support other people. So I was psyched for that.
It's always ideal. I love all this for you. I wanna transition to this next topic because I'm so ready to just first of all, today's a great day to do this because today, Rob, you were tagged in a video where you're being roasted for being the guy who keeps posting about the cold plunges because it's like, we get it. You are better than us. Like, I'm sick of cold plunging. It is everywhere. Everything that I have learned about cold plunging has absolutely been against my will. But I'd still like, I don't know, I guess it's still worth asking, like, because we get it, you do it every day, but, like, why don't the rest of us, right? So how do you mentally amp yourself to get it done? Because 'Cause I'm sure, like you said, Rob Howe is a human being, he has off days, so how are you doing this all the time still?
I do have off days. I am not perfect, and I don't try to be. I think that's something that, I said the other day at the office. I was like, even the best shooters only shoot 40%, like in the NBA, right? Like, if you shoot over 40% from 3, you're in like a very top tier of a shooter. That means that you miss 6 out of 10. And so I think for me, like, can I have more good days than bad days? Can I like do the things that are going to help me win the day more often than I don't? And so, you say like everything you made about or you learned about cold plunging is against your will. I have loved how many questions I've gotten in the last 6 weeks about cold plunging because it really is having a moment again. I'm not sure exactly what it was that like sparked it at this point, but I'm not new to this, been doing this for a while, and obviously like have my plunge at home. And no, it's not because I'm better than anyone, but to me, and I made a video about it recently, and it was my first like cold plunge reel to really like pop off. And it was basically like, it's so simple. The more studies that come out about cold water, whether it's cold shower, whether it's cold immersion, show pretty much conclusive evidence that it's good for you. It increases your metabolic rate, it decreases pain, it like increases brown fat, whatever your like KPI is, your key performance indicator, whatever thing you're looking for, whatever benefit, it has something probably. Like, I even heard somebody saying earlier this week, like, it jumpstarts glutathione production in your body. It's like, okay, well, what doesn't it do at that point? Like, it seems like a cure all. So for me, it's just nice that it's like, in the zeitgeist and like in the news because I can contribute to that. And I'm a big fan and an advocate for cold plunging. But I had this idea like, the simplest things, and that's the video that I was trying to give this, like, inspiring talk, and it's in the cold, so my voice goes into cold voice, which is like so I was just thinking about, like, this idea of novelty and, like, simplicity, and the things that bring us the most impact in our lives are often extremely simple, and they're often too easy, and it seems like they should be more difficult. And because of that, we don't attract ourselves to them. We don't like get stuck on it. So cold plunging for me has a ton of benefits. It's still really hard for me to make myself go outside, especially like it's been chilly the last couple of days, to make myself go outside, jump in that cold water. But I know that when I do, I feel better, that it's good for me, that there's a benefit in it for me, even if it's not short term, because there's like basically no short term benefits except that you feel good. It's the long-term benefits. And so when I look at my life and over the past year in the long term, I played over 100 days of really intense basketball. Last Saturday, I woke up feeling dangerous and I just went and cooked my Saturday run. I just was unstoppable. I felt great. And I think like, to know that I can still have a day like that, I didn't think I had any more of those in me at a certain point, that I had that was it for me, that I would just never be that guy again. And so, to know that it's a small part of that is huge. So, yeah, like I have less inflammation. I exercise way more. I'm in way better shape. I look and feel better. I jump higher. I run faster. None of that is like directly associated with the cold, but the cold allows me to meet the demands of my life and still hit my workouts, still get my sleep, and understand like everything that needs to go into that. And one thing I didn't realize is like how much of that I missed. I just missed being able to be an athlete, and it's part of my routine and I love it, and we gotta get you in the plunge
No,
because
I'm
it's cold as all get out.
like, I guess it's just for me, like, I'm glad we talk about cold plunging, but I guess to me the question's like, it's two layered, right? Because it's like, right, you're the cold plunge guy, you're the workout guy, you look better, you feel better. That's great. I love that for you. But I remember something you said to me, I'm gonna call it season one of us podcasting together, that how you do one thing is like how you do everything. So you just seem so consistent. But again, you can't be perfect. So it's like, do you just like you said, you only like you're just trying your best on a day to day? Like what kind of mental gymnastics are you doing? And if you're doing any at all?
Well, I am doing it for sure, and I have low moments. I'm on kind of a winning streak right now with my mental health. I'll just call it that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's because I'm journaling and, like, sleeping enough and, like, exercising and, like, getting going outside and cold plunging. It's, like, all the stuff that's helping me be the best version of myself is boring and simple,
I love
and,
it.
I didn't wanna believe that I was, like, a silver bullet person or somebody looking for, like, this big, sexy, exciting new thing that's gonna help me conquer the world, but I definitely was. Like, I was just trying to find, like, whatever the latest and greatest thing is or whatever the latest trend is, and now I think I'm just aging and becoming more comfortable with who I am in a way that is like, "Yeah, okay, I am a guy that journals now. I am a guy that cold plunges. I am a guy that, goes the extra mile." And so, yeah, how you do something is how you do everything is definitely a thing that I've said and I believe. And I think like, I'm less concerned now with, you know, leaving a legacy or like trying to overachieve. But I think like the things that I can control are, hey, like Rob has integrity. Rob works hard. He shows up for his people. His yes is yes and his no is no. And I think that's, cold plunging is part of that. And I think also it's like doing the hard shit. Sorry for cursing families, but like doing the hard shit day, like first thing in the morning, the hardest thing you might do all day is turning that shower to cold and just sitting under there because it sucks. It's like, ugh. Or when I'll sometimes like when I'm really struggling, I'll be like feet in and legs in. I'm kind of like standing in the cold plunge. And then I'm just like, all right, like deep breath. And I just like go in and like some days, like I'm only in there for a minute or 45 seconds. And those days I get out, I'm just like, "God, it's cold," but I feel better. I did it. I made it. Not every workout that I do has to be an hour and a half of like, really hitting every lift. If I go in there and I get 20 minutes of sweating and doing my main stuff, like that's good enough some days. So I think like consistency over time. I used to try to get all the workouts I missed back with one workout. I used to try to get all the sleep that I missed back with one night of like 14 hours of sleep or something. I used
Mm-hmm.
to try to binge my way through those things. And now as I get older, I'm a slow learner, I guess. I'm just like, trying to show up consistently day in and day out. And the cold plunge is part of that. If I can force myself into the cold water for a couple minutes early in the morning, what can't I do?
No, what can't I? I mean, I get it. No, I love it. It's just maybe we're both slow learners because I too, I'm in this. I got a workout in today. I was telling you earlier for the first time in a while. And after the workout, I was like, why don't I do this every day? You like how this feels. Like, this is a great feeling. Your brain is clear. You can think through stuff. Like, you don't feel so foggy. You want to do your jobs, multiple. So it's like, why do you just let yourself do the easy stuff, which is lay in bed, be depressed, not take care of your diabetes? So if you needed to hear this like I did, Come work for Rob or listen to the podcast
Well,
every week.
I want to be careful though, because like you got to have back to the dichotomy, back to the duality. And
Yeah.
I think I'm just going to be talking like this for the rest of my life, I guess. But like, yeah, I mean, there are days where I got to, I'm so tired from like on Saturday, I got before noon, I had like an 18 strain. I had burned 3,000 calories and I was tired. And I just kind of watched TV for the afternoon before I, worked on a couple of like side projects. And um, it's okay to rest. It's okay to need space. It's okay to be depressed. But I think what I realized about me is, if I'm doing the things, and I've talked about kind of my like depression checklist. I haven't
Yeah.
gone back to that, specifically in a while, because I think a lot of my routines are making sure that I'm hydrated, making sure I'm outside, making sure I'm getting movement. Um, and that I'm actively participating in my life. And I think like I want to be intentional. A thing that kept coming up for me with my therapist last year was that I wanted to eliminate drift time. Like I was like, I was spending time drifting and I was losing time just like mindlessly consuming stuff, either on social media or otherwise. And I just kind of flipped it. I was like, well, instead of like eliminating something or trying to like, get away from something, what if I just was like more present and more aware and more mindful of everything that I'm doing? And I think that that is something that has consistently been a theme that I'm kind of striving for in my life. And I'm starting to, not, whether because of cold plungers, whether because of my relationship with my wife, whether because I'm just getting a little bit older and wiser, um, I'm starting to find that present state, that intentionality state. And I'm not perfect and I have bad days. But what I'm looking back and like tracking some of it, I'm like, wow, I really am getting more done. I really am happier with who I am. My relationships are improving. And that's just because I'm present in my life. I often, when I'm at my lowest mental health, and I'm talking a lot, but this is my podcast, I guess, so I can talk as much. But
Say whatever you want.
I have like on my lowest moments, I feel this sense of dread because my life is happening and I'm acting like it's gonna happen down the road. I'm waiting for something to happen so that I can start living, quote unquote, air quotes, start living. And so I think where I'm at now is that I'm more comfortable with the idea that my life is already unfolding, that it is what it is, and I am in it actively.
Interesting. I think maybe a lot of us do that. I don't think you're alone in that respect.
I know I'm not. I know I'm
Yeah.
not alone. And I think, when I talk to people, I recognize I see a lot of myself in those types of things. And I think, we're all the sort of protagonist, main character of our own story. But
Yes.
you are an active participant. Like you're writing that story every day. And, for some people, some days, like, it might just be sitting on the couch watching Netflix or letting the social media algorithms dictate what they consume. I think now, taking a more mindful approach to those types of things will
Yeah.
put you in a much healthier headspace. But that's not for me to decide for somebody else.
Yeah.
So, the things that work for me, I've learned are actively participating in my life, showing up for myself, whether that's through working out or learning or jumping in the cold tub or spending time with my wife. Like those are the things that I need to do to make sure that I can give of myself to others who are depending on me.
I love that. All of that is absolutely beautiful. You're a healthy man. Are you the Adonis Creed of your movie? Rob?
Uh no, I don't even know where to go with that. I think we could lose another hour on this podcast by doing that. So I don't know. That's kind of that's where I am with my headspace right now. Yeah, I mean, I go to therapy. That's why I told Erica in the middle of that movie, like men will literally fight for the heavyweight championship of the world instead of go to therapy because I've lived it. I've tried to out achieve my mental, faults, my own personal faults, and there's just no way to do that. I think becoming comfortable with the shoes that you're walking in, no matter where you are, is the first step to wherever you're trying to go.
Amen. Sensei Rob is in the hot seat today, ladies and gentlemen. I love it.
That cold water is just filtering that wisdom in my brain.
Yeah, it says making you less full of nonsense, and I love it. Submerge him every day.
Although I do have some nonsense, and I just get to let that flag fly just a little bit more privately sometimes. So, but I think we're gonna have some funny cold plunge videos coming very soon. So be on the
I like
lookout.
it.
I'm gonna let that freak flag fly. It's gonna be fun.
I'm
Um,
excited.
okay. Earlier we talked about my difficult diabetes state. But you also had some difficult diabetes days and also just kinda led to a little bit of, like, micro burnout or, like, fatigue, and I'd love to talk a little bit more about that as well. So, it's not all just fun and games when Eritrea is out on the road taking over Europe.
Jeez Louise, taking over Europe. That's interesting because I was in Berlin and I got to learn a lot about scary stuff. So Hitler's
About
a
people
bad
who were
man.
trying to who were trying to take over.
Hitler was a bad man, dude. I went to Brandenburg. I was like, this is weird. First of all, I want to say that I feel very, very lucky to get to go to these big medical conferences. It's not something that the regular person with diabetes has access to. So it's really, I'm just feel glad that I get to go. I get to learn about all these treatments and things that are now available for people living with diabetes and just kind of get so much hope. So that's always really nice. But there is something to be said about being in an 8-hour time zone difference and just having a tough time with your diabetes. You talk a lot about sleeping, and when you are in a different time zone and you're not feeling well, you're not sleeping well. So I I took a flight from Dallas to Berlin. There's a connection in Paris. My original flight from Dallas was delayed. So when I got to Paris, my connecting flight was gone. And so I thought to myself, what can I do to still enjoy this day? I can take the last flight out of Paris to Berlin. And so there was one at 9 p.m. that night. I got there like 7:30 in the morning. And I thought to myself, I will enjoy this day in Paris because I've never been to Paris. So I'm there. I'm there the entire day. I have an awesome day. But by the end of the day, I had walked 18,000 steps.
Ooh.
My blood sugars were not bad that day, but I was exhausted because keep in mind, like I flew in from Dallas. So it's like already that time zone change. And now like do a marathon that day, for someone like me. And now fly to Berlin at 9 o'clock at night. So I get on the plane. And when I tell you I sat down on the plane and I fell asleep and I woke up in Berlin. Like I sat, like you sit on down on the runway and you're just like, I am dead. I wake up in Berlin, exhausted, go to my hotel room, I go to sleep, and I wake up the next morning and my blood sugar is like 345. And I didn't go to sleep until like 3 o'clock in the morning because I just couldn't fall back asleep after a plane ride and an Uber. I'm exhausted. I go to work, walk around some more because I want to take advantage of the day before the conference and see Berlin. And again, I do not sleep well that night. So it's just like all these little micro, I don't want to say decisions, but I don't know, consequences of being on an international trip added up. And so my first day of the conference, my blood sugars were in range 8%.
Mm.
It was a really tough diabetes day. And I think what people don't think about when they have, like when you said, oh, it's not a bad diabetes day, it can be a bad diabetes life, or it's just a bad diabetes day, not a bad diabetes life, like Jazz says, that might be true and it is. But when you have an accumulation of events and it's one bad, bad, bad diabetes day, it can drag. And for me, it dragged on that whole week.
Something I've learned about that concept, I learned from my Whoop app because I learned about sleep. So it has this concept of like sleep debt.
Mhm.
So if you don't get enough sleep for a couple days, like the first 2 days, it's not that big of a deal. But if your sleep debt starts to accumulate and compound, so I'm like a compound interest guy, not just in finance, but just like exercise and diabetes management and travel or whatever. It adds up. It like builds a debt thing. So you've had a 8% time in range one day, and then even if you doubled that the next day, got to 16%. Then you're like for 2 days
Yes.
now you've just been riding the roller coaster, just being miserable, and you're in a new place, and you're jet lagged,
And
and
I'm
you ate strange
working.
food, and you've got to work, and you kind of start to judge yourself sometimes too because like, oh, I really wish I could enjoy myself and be present in the situation, but I can't because my diabetes is getting in the way. So how did you maintain the rest of the trip?
Well, I there's a literal video of so Diatribe hosts a really cool event called Musing, where we get like key opinion leaders within the diabetes space to speak on different, like just different things. And this was a really really interesting one. But when I tell you that I fell asleep at the table, literally, like somebody took a video of me with my arms just because, like, my body was crashing. After there was one day that I literally got back to my room and I was like, I cannot think, I cannot breathe, I cannot. So if you saw me at the conference and I ran away from you, I'm so sorry. I know I did that to a couple of people because, like, people want to say hello. They listen to the pod, they know who we are, and I want to say hello too. But when I'm not my best self, I don't want to say hello to anybody. So I did
Mm,
not manage well. I will not lie. But by the end of it, I kinda, like, got my got my life together. I was able to go to a DDoC event the last night, which was really nice to see everyone and have a nice time with people living with diabetes. So, I mean, I got to experience a conference, but it really felt like diabetes is holding me back. And I think that that is my least favorite thing when that happens. I think that it really, really frustrates me, not just physically, but also like mentally. And it just got me thinking like about chronic fatigue and like people living with diabetes and how like managing this on a daily life and controlling your blood
Well,
sugars can be hard.
it is hard. And I think it comes back to the dichotomy of diabetes, right? And that was one of the final slides in that presentation is like, can you accept that diabetes is gonna not it is gonna hold you back some days with and not judge yourself for it. So we've talked a lot about on this podcast about how I'm kind of like, retconning my like, diabetes doesn't have to hold you back persona because while that's true for some people, it's not true for everyone, and it's not true day in and day out. So I think it's much more humanizing to say, yes, hey, I'm Rob, I'm speaking to you with diabetes, but also like there's days where diabetes kicks my butt and I can't and it keeps me from doing things that I love. So
Also, we look so healthy and we look so happy and we look so good. Like, I think that especially both of us are people who present very like,
abled.
yes. And so when I have a day where I am completely flat, like it's such a 180 that it's really like it can be shocking to other people. And so I don't know. I'm glad I had the space to be myself. I work at a really great place and I have great coworkers. And yeah, I just felt lucky that I had that, but I survived kind of because I am here, right? So that's the end of the story. I'm not supposed to be here right now. We were supposed to record this episode a week ago and I was going to be in Cairo.
Hmm.
But when I got to Germany, I have family who lives in Germany. So I got to spend time with my grandparents. When I went to go see them, I spoke to my cousin and I was just like, I am exhausted. And she was just like, you have been saying that since you got here. Do not go to Egypt. Like, go home, go to
Yeah.
sleep, like, get some rest. So I kind of compromised and decided to take myself to Amsterdam. I'm really lucky. My family only lives like an hour away from Amsterdam by train. So I took a train over to Amsterdam. I spent a couple days there where I tried to rest, but because I was so tired, I couldn't even do that. So it's
Mm.
like, it was nice to come home and I slept for like 12 hours on the plane. And when I got here, so I'm feeling much more myself, but I've been beating myself up for the last week. So it's like, you could be in Cairo right now. You could be in Cairo right now. And I'm having like serious FOMO. But at the same time, I'm trying to remind myself that like being in my house, doing the things I need to do, setting up a routine so that my diabetes can be in a good place and I can be in a good place is also a worthwhile activity. Traveling the world is great, but it's not great if your diabetes isn't where you need it to be. So I need to like work on that.
Well, thank you for being so open about that and vulnerable about it because I think it's easy to be like, oh yeah, traveling the world's great, like no worries at all, and hide that. And it's great to have that transparency. So thank you for sharing. Something that
Of
my
course.
sister told me a few years ago was that the brightest candle burns out the fastest. And so you got to, really watch yourself and make sure that, when you're doing, even if you're doing things that you want to do, like, is it too
Yes.
much and be right and recognize that. And you mentioned chronic fatigue earlier and like people with diabetes are like
Mhm.
wildly fatigued.
Yep.
We talk about like losing 180 hours of sleep per year, times, 10 years, that's 1,800 hours of sleep lost. That's a ton of time.
If you think about like the factors, right? So all that to say, also just to say, like, I am taking a break from traveling. I just wanted to say that. Like, I'm not going anywhere for a little while. Routines are important because, yes, I've looked intensely into chronic fatigue because I think there's something wrong with me. Okay, so I went to this as a concert on Friday, and as we were driving back from the concert to get to me to eat, I fell asleep in the car for 14 minutes. Like, I went to the best concert ever, and here I am just asleep. I am tired all the time. And I talked to you about it, and I'm like, Rob, are you a sleepy person? You're like, I am a sleepy boy. And I'm like, is this normal? And I used to have an ongoing joke with my friend in college, Diana, and everybody would call us like the sleepy girls because we would just fall asleep at parties. Like, there she is asleep on the couch. So is this normal? Like, am I crazy? So,
Well, I think there's an important normal thing to talk about related to diabetes and fatigue. Like, I'm looking here, I've got this pulled up from the National Institute of Health in the United States. Fatigue is a common symptom of diabetes that is not limited to uncontrolled diabetes. So it has nothing to do with your level of
right.
diabetes control. There's just fatigue is part of this sort of life with a chronic illness. And I think we all understand it, but when you see it written in health journals and you're like, "Oh wow, this really is my diabetes. It's not me." That's an important thing to note, and it makes you feel better. You're right, I like to sleep. What really helped me look at that without judgment was reading about how much LeBron sleeps. It's
How
like
much wait, how much does he sleep?
he
Tell
sleeps
me,
like 12
please.
hours a day. And, I think for me, we look at these high achievers and we just think, oh, or we read these hustle culture interviews. It's like, yeah, this guy, he sleeps 3 hours a night and he's up every day before, and he works out 4 times and he basically has 6 days in a day because he, doesn't sleep. And it's like, well, that's A, not sustainable and B, probably not even true. And at the same time, it like looks, he's like, oh, well, is there something wrong with me because I need more sleep? I can crush 9 hours of sleep, no problem, anytime, anywhere,
Same.
except for maybe on a plane because I just don't really fit. So if I'm able to fit somewhere, I can knock out and sleep. And, I used to look at that with judgment. And now I just know that the demands of my time and my 24 hours are pretty significant and pretty high stress. And you got diabetes on top of that. So, why should I judge myself for having to sleep a little bit longer than some of my peers who don't have any of those things going on? I also don't have kids right now yet, so there's nobody waking me up in the middle of the night, so I got to enjoy it while I can. And so, that's something else that I'm trying to be present with. But yeah, I mean, I think again, can you accept the realities of life and life with diabetes without judgment? That to me has been like the biggest breakthrough for me. And hopefully I think you too, like just seeing yourself in other people and having conversations, like even just with me, like, hey, what's wrong with me? Do I need to sleep a lot? It's like, I'm a sleepy dude. I'm a sleepy boy.
Yeah.
I love to sleep. I've loved to sleep since I was a child. Like,
Me too.
so I
I
mean, that's just who I am.
I love sleep. I don't think it's a bad thing. I guess I just like was looking at myself a little weird. Like we are both getting older. So it's like maybe we should hire some younger people for this podcast because 9:30, I'm just like, ooh, baby, I can't wait to get in my bed, like make my little cup of tea, go to sleepy. Like I love being at rest. But also I don't want this to be confused with, and I say this very like openly. I don't want this to be confused with diabetes distress. Like that is something completely different. I think like that's like I feel like that's more like a mental health thing. And what I'm talking about right now specifically is like the physical feeling of being like I am tired and I need to sleep consistently so that I don't feel so tired around my diabetes or just like in my general day-to-day life because I don't know, maybe if you build a better routine, you'll be less tired. But it's based off my because I'm literally I spent like a week Googling all of this, but I don't think chronic fatigue with people with diabetes is going anywhere. So like you said, it's just a part of living with the disease and we've got to like carry that
Yeah,
water.
if you wanna learn more, just Google fatigue and diabetes, and there's a lot of peer-reviewed journal entries that will come up to talk about it. We're 10 times more likely to experience fatigue compared to people without diabetes, and that's from endocrineweb.com. So right off the bat, first page of Google, do not judge yourself for needing to sleep a little bit more, and also, caregivers, be conscious of it. If your kids need to sleep a little bit more, there could be some diabetes, fatigue, chronic fatigue involved with that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure.
All right. So the mailbag entries were pretty light. I want you guys to email us mailbag@diabeticsdoingthings.com. Before we sign off, there's something I wanted to do. I just thought of it in the middle. What's your blood sugar right now? Just say it on the air.
Ooh.
I'm 117.
Oh wow, you're so annoying. 196. That's actually not
Nice.
bad.
Not
That's
bad
not
at all.
terrible considering what I've been working on. But what I also want to tell you is that my pump is on 15% battery and only has 17 units in the cartridge. So judge me, baby.
Yeah. I've been there. Somebody one time I like was like 5 minutes. Like it was like the little red line for the calibration, and like my insulin reservoir like thing was like red. It's like, yeah, when you're just kind of on your last legs, hey, it's all good. Charge that pump, get
Yeah,
that thing
I
going.
I I never charge my pump. That's something. So actually, the last thing we can talk about, but I went on a date last week. I went to the Dallas Museum of Arts. It was beautiful. It was great. Everything is awesome. And then my pump died, and I was like, "Girl, what are we gonna do?" Luckily, I had a little syringe and a vial in my purse because if you watch my reels, I always keep that thing on me. G-Vogue syringe vials, and so I took me a little shot, and I was fine. But damn, I really got to keep myself plugged in to be alive. Like, what is this?
That happened to me a couple weeks ago. I was playing basketball and my sight got ripped out, and I didn't have a spare one on me because I had just cleaned out my bag. Why does it always happen that way?
Sucks.
Um, and I could have kept playing, and I was like, I'm going home. I don't like I don't want to deal with this. So I got in my car and I drove back across town and I put my pump back on and I was like, you know
It was
what?
your it was your Cartman moment. I'm going home.
Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what it was like. So yeah, I don't know. Hopefully if you made it to this part of the podcast, hopefully you enjoyed it. Again, mailbag at Diabetics Doing Things. We're doing this show every month. Keep an eye on all of our channels. We got events coming up. Big stuff with the North Texas Food Bank, doing local events here in Dallas, and then announcing some out of town events as well. So even if you're
Yeah.
not in the DFW area, we'll be coming to you very soon.
Run it, as they say.